Are BTS becoming westernized, as some people claim, or are they staying true to their authentic Korean roots? Or does any of this even matter? Let's discuss. Hi everyone, and welcome to Academic K-pop Analysis. I'm a current graduate student who researches K-pop, fandom, and social media, and have published an academic study about BTS myself. This is a series where I explain what academic researchers and scholars are writing about K-pop in an easy-to-understand way. Today's video will be a bit different from my others because it's adapted from a lesson I taught on K-pop, BTS, and cultural authenticity as a TA. So, this video will be in a lecture format, and then I'll ask some discussion questions at the end that you guys can hopefully answer in the comments. I'll do my best to respond to everyone who answers them. Before I begin, please remember to subscribe if you want to see more deep academic analysis like this in the future. I will now give an overview of the video. First, I will explain what cultural authenticity and cultural essentialism are. Next, I will describe how market forces affect authenticity. After that, I will show a BTS idol performance and a Korean theater performance and have us compare and contrast the cultural authenticity of each. Then I will talk about how I would apply some of these concepts to K-pop and discuss if K-pop is actually Korean or just westernized. Finally, I will give some closing remarks about why this matters and pose some discussion questions. Now let's get into this mini lesson. Cultural authenticity is a term used in cultural anthropology, and it primarily seeks to answer the question, what makes something feel authentic? My main source for this will be an academic blog post written by Dr. Daniel Little. I did read through some other academic sources on cultural authenticity, but I find that this post does the best job of explaining the concept in an understandable way. Basically, Dr. Little identifies two components that can make something feel authentic: expression and artisanship. Expression means that the art or practice expresses and reveals some of the meaning, symbols, and practices of the other culture. Why this is so important is because according to anthropologist Clifford Geertz, culture is a web of significance. An authentic practice or piece of art, therefore, is useful for understanding a culture's meanings and symbols and how they relate within this web of significance. Artisanship means that the actual human, practical history of the object makes all the difference between authentic and inauthentic. This includes the way it was made and the human communities and practices within which the artisan performed his or her work to create the object. This means the extremely accurate recreations are inauthentic because it is a simulation of the culture, not a product of the culture itself. This is kind of like the difference between playing a farming sim game versus being an actual farmer. We can also identify a space between cultural authenticity and inauthenticity, described by Dean McCannell as staged authenticity. In short, staged authenticity refers to a cultural event, practice, or activity that is staged for the purpose of tourism. Think of luau's held in Hawaiian resorts, for example. Luau's are an authentic cultural practice of Native Hawaiians, but resort luau's are not held for Native Hawaiian cultural purposes. Instead, their purpose is to entertain tourists and make them feel they are experiencing the real Hawaiian culture. Other examples would be Korean folk villages or American colonial reenactments. There is another type of authenticity, one that is much more deceptive and nebulous, cultural essentialism, which will be important as we move forward. Cultural essentialism is the idea of an intangible cultural essence underlying a given people at a certain time. Cultural essentialism posits that there's a pure form of Korean, Indian, Brazilian, Italian, etc. culture in terms of which we might define the authenticity of cultural products. Therefore, a product is authentic if it corresponds accurately to the cultural essence to which it refers. If this sounds like a rather vague and nebulous definition, that's because it is. Some cautionary questions that should pop up are: who defines what a culture's essence is, and for what purpose? Are they an insider or an outsider? Additionally, cultures are not fixed, uniform realities, but rather ongoing dynamic processes of creation and change. This is because when different cultures interact, neither is unchanged as a result. Cultures have been interacting with each other and evolving for millennia, back as far as the Silk Road and even before that. Therefore, there is no such thing as a static cultural essence we can point to, making it useless for determining authenticity. I want to caution here that cultural essentialism is not a theory you should be endorsing or using. Oftentimes, essentialism is used in extremist, xenophobic, and racist ideologies to justify their hate. As an example, maybe you think Mexican immigrants coming into America are all rapists and bringing drugs, and just generally bad hombres, because that is the essence of those people, which is of course false. Another example is in medicine, where essentialism can lead to potentially unequal or fatal treatment for medical reasons, like assuming that differences for various diseases in Afro-American populations are due to racial difference, aka something essential to that race, rather than social or material causes, like the food one has access to or toxins in one's home. Both of these examples are horrible for reasons I just explained, but it illustrates why you should not apply this concept too easily in real life. It is often very harmful. I wanted to explain this concept so you all can be on guard for it in your regular life and be skeptical whenever you notice it being used in a harmful way. While everything I've just explained is all well and good, it doesn't account for one common situation. What about cultural products that only exist to sell or trade to foreigners? Examples of these include Chinese porcelain, decorative Navajo rugs, and Inuit carvings. Dr. Little goes into more detail on the history of each of these in his post. We could think of these objects as satisfying artisanship, but not expression. This is because while it was created in the culture itself, it doesn't reveal any of the culture's meanings or symbols. It creates this nagging fear that the influence of external consumer demand has deformed the artifact. Therefore, we might say that authenticity requires that the product be created according to the values and meanings of the indigenous culture, not the profit-seeking behavior of skilled artisans aiming to create the traditional product that will sell best with the tourists, which would be staged authenticity. Nonetheless, doesn't the creation of these profit-motivated cultural products still exist as the product of an authentic culture? This is the eternal debate over authenticity that seems to circle around forever. But now let's try to apply this to K-pop, a cultural product that is undeniably motivated by market forces. Before I explain to you what I think about K-pop's cultural authenticity, I want to do a little exercise with you all. I want you to watch 2 performances, which will be linked in the info card above as well as in the description. I can't show these clips in full here due to copyright, so please remember to come back to this video. They would be BTS's performance of Idol at the 2018 MMAs and highlights from Miso, Baby Jang-jong. This second performance is a traditional Korean play and based on a satirical novel written by an unknown author in the late Joseon era, which is in the 18th or 19th century. Prior to the 20th century, Korean plays were much more performance than drama, which we will see in the video. Keep in mind where and why this play is being performed, in Malaysia for non-Koreans as part of an overseas cultural export project. For an explanation of the traditional Korean elements in BTS's performance, I will link a great video in the info card in the description. After you've done that, I would like you to think about which of the 2 performances is more authentically Korean in your opinion. Why? Recall some of the concepts I brought up earlier in the video, like artisanship, expression, staged authenticity, and cultural essentialism. As a bonus, how would it change your answer if instead of the Idol performance, I asked you to compare the Blood, Sweat, and Tears music video to the play? Keep your answer in mind as we go into the next section, where I go over my thoughts on this topic. I want to talk about cultural authenticity in K-pop by responding to a piece written by the sociologist John Lee in 2011 titled, "What is the K in K-pop?" Although quite dated, as it is a decade old now, many of his main points are still repeated by a lot of people today. If you were watching this video as a part of a class, it would be an assigned reading for this lecture. I encourage you to read it, but I will summarize the main points of the paper I want to respond to. Lee's main argument is that K-pop is naked commercialism with a garb of cultural respectability, but has nothing to do with traditional Korean Confucian culture, and therefore is not authentically Korean. In addition, Lee argues that K-pop's transnational appeal is because of the fact that there isn't much authentic Koreanness in it, therefore making it easy to sell outside of Korea. Furthermore, Lee asserts that K-pop acts as a sort of Korea brand peddled by the South Korean government and sent overseas as an extension of the Korean government's export-oriented economics of the 60s. I have a video about the Korean government's usage of soft power in K-pop that you can watch up above. One thing that jumps out at me, and hopefully also you, about these arguments is how much they rely on cultural essentialism. Lee seems to believe that there is an essence of Korea that can be found in Korean Confucian culture, particularly that of the Joseon dynasty. If you don't know much about Korean history, it's not necessary knowledge to understand my point here. Why is the Joseon dynasty where the essence of Korea is located? Why not the Japanese colonial period or the Three Kingdoms period? Why is Confucianism the major indicator for something being Korean? I believe that things like capitalism, colonialism, Buddhism, globalization, and the Korean War are just as, if not more important for understanding modern-day Korea, and most of these didn't start in the Joseon era. Also, while Lee seems to think that things like the inclusion of English lyrics in songs and adoption of mainstream Western genres make K-pop inauthentic, the same can be said for Confucianism. Confucianism isn't even authentically Korean, it was imported from China. Furthermore, even if we were to accept the fact that one could find the essence of Korea in the Joseon period and Confucianism, there are still hints of it in the K-pop industry. For example, the group dynamic and teamwork mentality, an emphasis on humbleness, manners, and respect, among others. My point with this is to cast doubt on the widespread idea that K-pop is inauthentic Korean culture, as I think it's actually an excellent reflection of modern-day Korea. Think of K-pop's ruthless capitalism and consumerism, decades of American influence via troops left from the Korean War, and globalization. All of these are quite visible in Korean society at large. Dr. Sitabao Seiji gave a great talk that goes over the history of Korean popular music, including the influence of American troops, that I will link in the card and in the description. Well, who cares about all of this? Why does it even matter what is authentic culture? All of the points I've laid out here seem to cast doubt on the usefulness of identifying authentic cultures at all, so why would people care? One of the main groups of people who would care about what is authentic culture are those whose cultures are at risk of dying out. For example, many indigenous peoples necessarily have to engage in an intensive cultural preservation to keep their cultures from either dying out or being warped beyond recognition by the mainstream. This can also be why certain groups or cultures bristle at signs of cultural appropriation from outsiders without proper understanding or crediting the culture it was taken from. Their culture is already at risk of extinction, so not properly crediting or disrespectfully diluting and warping the culture does nothing to help its survival. On the other hand, respectful tributes done with the blessing of that culture's people and a deep, lived understanding of the culture are celebrated for bringing proper awareness to the dying culture. Korea was once in this position during the Japanese colonial period, when the Japanese attempted to destroy inferior Korean language and culture. But I think it's safe to say that these days, Korean culture doesn't have an immediate risk of dying out. I don't want to go too far down the cultural appropriation rabbit hole here, as it's a topic that deserves its own video, but I felt it would be incomplete to not mention it at all. We've covered quite a lot in this video, a lot of which has been simplified for time. If you have any corrections or extra information you'd like to include in the comments, please feel free to. To answer the questions I posed at the beginning of the video, I don't think BTS is westernized because that would imply that there's some essence of Korea or the West that exists, which I hope I've shown isn't a very valuable discussion to have because it relies on cultural essentialism. Now I want to pose a few discussion questions. I'd love it if you could answer any one or combination of these questions in the comments below. What was your initial answer to the question, which of the two performances is more authentically Korean in your opinion? Did it change with the new information I presented afterwards? How? More generally, drawing on any other K-pop knowledge that you might have, in combination with what I've presented here, is K-pop an authentic expression of Korean culture, or is it contaminated by the intrusion of Western technologies and products? Does the fact that K-pop is directing itself towards creating products that fit with the taste of a foreign public undermine the authenticity of the work? Please feel free to disagree with me here. Why are people so concerned with authenticity in the first place? In addition to the answer I presented here, are there any other reasons why someone might be concerned with authenticity? Are there different answers to this question based on where the people in question are located in terms of nationality, different social groups within a nation, or class in general? Even if you don't have any specific or deep answers to any of these questions, I would love to know any general thoughts you have about the video, topic, or performances. My channel is still small enough that I can respond to all the comments left on my video, so I'm happy to engage with all y'all. If you're interested in more academic BTS content, I made another video about BTS and Korea-Japan relations that I will link here. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. All of the sources are linked in the description, as well as my social media. That's all for now. Bye!